400 meters from winning the Los Angeles Marathon, a man is alone in first place, with nobody within striking distance. No one behind him is even close. The race should be over. And then, a stranger in the crowd steps into his path. And in the next 10 seconds, he loses the closest marathon finish in the history of the sport, collapses at the line, and has to be carried away on a stretcher, while another man's hand goes up in victory. This is the story of Michael Kamani Kamau, Nathan Martin, and the 2026 LA Marathon, a race that came down to 1/100th of a second and a finish so controversial, the organizers had to release an official statement defending themselves within 24 hours. To understand how insane this finish actually was, you need to understand who these two men were before that day. Because on paper, this race should not have been close at all. Nathan Martin is 36 years old. He's not a professional runner in the way you'd picture one. He works as a substitute teacher and a high school cross-country and track coach in Jackson, Michigan. This is a guy who spends his weekdays helping teenagers learn how to pace an 800-meter repeat, then shows up on a Sunday to run 26.2 miles against some of the best distance runners on the planet. Michael Kamani Kamau is Kenyan, 34 years old, and running with the kind of pedigree Martin doesn't have. Kenyan marathoners dominate this sport at a level that's hard to overstate. Most major marathons in the world are won by Kenyan or Ethiopian runners in a given year. Kamau came into this race as a serious contender, not a long shot. March 8th, 2026, the 41st running of the Los Angeles Marathon, and almost immediately, Kamau takes control of the race. For most of the 26.2 miles, he is the solo leader, not part of a lead pack, not trading positions, out front, alone, running his own race while everyone else fights to keep him in sight. With 5 miles to go, most of the field has accepted the race is decided. Martin is back in the chase group, but here's the moment that changes everything. He notices nobody around him is picking up the pace. Everyone else is settled into survival mode, so Martin decides to push. Just him, deciding on his own, with 5 miles left, that if nobody else was going to make a move, he would. Over the next 4 miles, something remarkable starts happening. Martin isn't just holding pace, he's closing the gap. Kamau, still in the lead, still looking strong, has no idea a 36-year-old substitute teacher from Michigan is quietly eating into his lead, mile after mile. At 1.5 miles to go, Martin can finally see him. Not just sense he's out there somewhere, actually see him up the road. With 800 meters left, Martin makes the decision that defines the entire race. He starts his sprint. Not a controlled increase in pace, a full sprint, with 1/2 mile still standing between him and the finish line of a marathon. Think about what that actually requires. This is mile 26 of a 26.2 mile race. Every part of a marathoner's body is screaming to slow down at this point. And Martin chooses this exact moment to empty everything he has left. And for a while, it still doesn't look like enough. Kamau is still out front, still the leader, still on pace to win the Los Angeles Marathon outright. Then, with roughly 400 meters to go, inside sight of the finish line structure itself, everything falls apart in about 10 seconds. Race organizers had lead vehicles, the pace cars and police escort that run ahead of the leader to clear the course, and their planned exit point off the course was 300 meters from the finish. Standard procedure. Every major marathon does this. But at the same time those vehicles were making their exit, a spectator, a woman carrying a Kenyan flag, moved into Kamau's path from the crowd. A video that later circulated on social media shows exactly what happened next. Kamau, trying to avoid running directly into her, cuts to his left and ends up following the lead vehicle's exit path instead of continuing straight toward the finish. A nearby race official, seeing him drift, actually waves him in that direction, apparently mistaking his position. For several seconds, the leader of the Los Angeles Marathon is running away away from the finish line. Multiple sources timed it at around 10 seconds off course. 10 seconds at the end of a marathon is not a small mistake. It's the difference between a comfortable win and a photo finish. Kamau realizes what's happening, turns himself back around, and starts sprinting for the corrected line. But the damage to his margin is already done, and Martin, closing from behind, is gaining every one of those seconds back. Here's the exact language the marathon organizers used the next day, responding directly to the growing controversy. They said they became aware of a video circulating on social media showing Kamau going slightly off course as their lead vehicles made what they called their pre-planned exit off the race route. In other words, their official position was the vehicles did nothing wrong. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. What they didn't fully address was the fan who stepped into the runner's path in the first place, or the official who waved him the wrong direction. A spokesperson later called the spectator interference a cause for concern, which is about as close as an official statement gets to admitting something went wrong without admitting fault for the result. Now picture the final meters. Kamau back on course, sprinting with everything he has left after nearly 2 hours and 11 minutes of racing, plus 10 unplanned seconds of confusion. Martin, who made his decisive move a mile and a half back, closing in stride by stride. This is where Kamau's body simply runs out. Not because he lacked will. His kick, in the words of people who watched it live, did not kick. There was nothing left to give. He'd emptied his reserves running the tangent everyone runs at the end of a marathon, then had to find extra reserves he didn't have to correct his direction and re-accelerate. Martin hawks him down in the final strides. At the tape, the actual finish line tape, both men are essentially arriving at the same instant. Martin's hand goes up. Kamau, just behind him, loses his footing and goes down, sprawled at the finish line, unable to stay upright after everything his body had just been asked to do. The official time, Nathan Martin, 2 hours, 11 minutes, 16.50 seconds. Michael Kimani Kamau, 2 hours, 11 minutes, 16.94 seconds. The margin between first and last second heartbreak, 1/100th of a second. Multiple outlets covering the race called it one of the most dramatic finishes in marathon history. Not hyperbole, an actual photo finish. The kind you'd expect to see in a 100-meter sprint, not at the end of 26.2 miles. For context on how much that margin actually meant, first place paid $25,000. Second place paid $10,000. $15,000. Separated by a fan with a flag, a confused wave from an official, and 1/100th of a second. Kamau didn't finish upright. He didn't get to celebrate a photo finish the way Martin did. Race personnel had to attend to him directly at the finish line, and he was ultimately taken away on a stretcher. One witness who filmed the finish said he genuinely believed Kamau had won when he watched it live. It wasn't until he got home and saw the news coverage that he learned Martin had actually taken it in the final strides. It's worth saying plainly, it was also reported that Kamau chose not to take on any fluids throughout the entire race, which may have compounded his exhaustion in those final chaotic meters. Whether that was a tactical choice or a mistake, it's one more factor stacked against him in a finish that was already working against him. Martin's own reaction afterward tells you everything about the kind of runner he is. He said his mindset was simple. In any race, he just wants to give everything he has. And when he saw the opportunity at the end, he took his last push. He described the exact moment the decision solidified, around 800 meters to go, telling himself he had to at least try. And things worked out from there. A 36-year-old substitute teacher and high school coach from Jackson, Michigan, just outkicked a Kenyan marathoner in the final 400 meters of the Los Angeles Marathon by 1/100th of a second, on a day when nearly everything that could go wrong for his opponent did. And by the next morning, his own students back in Michigan had a state champion marathoner for a coach. This wasn't even the first time something like this had happened recently. Reports at the time pointed out that a nearly identical situation had unfolded just one weekend earlier at the U.S. Half Marathon Championships. A leader misdirected in the closing stretch, costing them the win. Two major American races, back to back, decided in part by course confusion in the final meters. That's not a coincidence you can just shrug off. It's a pattern worth watching the next time you see a marathon come down to the wire. And to the credit of the sport itself, there was no asterisk attached to this one, at least not officially. Organizers confirmed no protest was ever filed, and the result stood exactly as it crossed the line. Kamau, by all accounts, never publicly blamed the fan, the official, or the vehicles. He simply had to live with the fact that the fastest 400 meters of his life weren't fast enough through no fault of his training or his effort. So here's what I want to know from you. Nathan Martin made his decisive move 1.5 miles from the finish, when nobody else in the chase group was willing to. Do you think Kamau still wins that race clean, no interference at all, or was Martin's kick simply the better one that day, regardless of what happened on the course? And the harder question, if you were the runner in Kamau's shoes, sprinting with everything left in your body, only to find out later it came down to 1/100th of a second because of 10 seconds you lost to a stranger in the crowd? How do you even process that? Tell me below. And if you want the story of the almost identical wrong turn finish that happened the weekend before this one, let me know, and I'll break that one down next.
Finish for